blood. We have red blood, which is oxygenated coming back from the placenta from the mother. We have deep blue blood, which is deoxygenated coming from the lower extremities and the upper extremities. And in the aorta, we have purple blood because it's a mixture of the two. Now, as we'll see when we get to the respiratory system, fetal hemoglobin is unique in the way it binds oxygen, so the fetus can deal with the lower oxygen supply in the arterial blood. So we'll start with the left ventricle. The left ventricle pumps blood out the ascending aorta, across the arch, down the thoracic aorta, to the abdominal aorta. It gets to the common iliacs and goes into the left and right common iliacs, down to the lower extremities. Some of that blood will go into the internal iliacs. From there, they will enter a branch that will carry them to the placenta via the umbilical arteries. Remember, we consider the umbilical arteries to carry deoxygenated blood. Relatively, it's the same amount of oxygen as getting to the foot in the baby, but we consider it to be relatively deoxygenated blood. It goes to the placenta, picks up oxygen, and returns to the heart. This is the umbilical cord here. This would be the umbilicus of the baby. What you have in is your belly button. And the umbilical vein carries that blood to the liver. What's it containing? Oxygen and nutrients. Sounds like what we just talked about. Hepatic artery for oxygen, portal vein for nutrients. And so the umbilical vein is the equivalent content of those two vessels after the baby is born. It still has those two vessels. The fetus is going to have an hepatic artery and a portal vein. It doesn't develop them later. But the purpose is being served by the umbilical vein. Yes, Andy?
Okay, so we're giving deoxygenated blood to the baby and taking oxygenated blood from the baby. So how is that helping the baby?
We're taking deoxygenated blood from the baby to the placenta.
To the placenta, okay.
It's picking up from the mother's blood the oxygen and the nutrients.
So the placenta is what's doing the transferring of
Yes.
the oxygen.
So remember, the maternal blood and the lacunae, the chorionic villi are dipped in that. So that's the site where this exchange is occurring. Okay? So now the blood comes back to the liver. Again, before it goes to anywhere else in the body, the liver has first dibs at those nutrients and at that oxygen. Not all of the returning blood has to percolate through all of the liver blood vessels. There is a bypass that occurs. And so this bypass will then dump the rest of the blood that doesn't go through the liver into the inferior vena cava. So we have the deoxygenated blood of the inferior vena cava mixing with the rich oxygen blood of the umbilical vein. And here the inferior vena cava now is purple. When it comes into the right atrium, it comes in at an angle that shoots most of it through the foramen ovale. Into the left atrium, down to the left ventricle.
So it actually skips the pulmonary.
Yeah. So superior vena cava blood will come in from the head and the upper extremities and go into the right ventricle. There will be some mixing, obviously, with the inferior vena cava blood. That will get pumped out the pulmonary trunk and go to the right lungs or the left lungs. We have another bypass system here. Remember, pressure in the lungs is high at this point because of fluid in the alveoli. And so there is a connection between the left pulmonary artery and the aortic arch known as the ductus arteriosus. And yet even more blood that was going to the lungs won't get there because it will leave the pulmonary artery and go into the aortic system even though it missed that chance in the heart. So it's like a second chance to get into the aorta. So I'm going to list on the board 5 structures. I'm going to go back to the previous picture. 5 fetal structures that we still have present in our bodies. Let's go back to this image. Okay. So again, here is the aorta coming down, going to the common iliac and internal iliac, and going to the umbilicus are 2 umbilical arteries. When your umbilical cord was cut, blood doesn't flow through those umbilical arteries anymore. So here's the umbilicus, and those 2 collapsed umbilical arteries are shown here and here. The middle line was part of the bladder that is no longer connected. So these two vessels right here are the collapsed umbilical arteries that don't go anywhere because your belly button is closed off. So I'm going to write the fetal structure on this side and the adult structure on this side. When you come back on Thursday, we'll review this again because I know you're not going to keep a whole lot of that. So fetal, I'm saying adult, but it's there in the child too, okay, as soon as we cut the umbilical cord. So umbilical arteries in the fetus are known after the umbilical cord is tied. They collapse and are known as the medial, not median, umbilical vein. Ligaments. Obviously, we no longer have our umbilical cord. But the umbilical vein, starting at the umbilicus, and you'll see this on the cadaver on Thursday, travels from the umbilicus to the liver. There's no more blood in it. So it's not a full vessel. And you can see it here in the liver. Here's the portal vein and hepatic artery. It's going to go into the same place because it functions the same. This is the collapsed umbilical vein. It's going to be from here to here. We're only seeing it where it's at the liver. All right, so the umbilical vein is now known as the ligamentum teres, which means round ligament. Now it's a different structure. Why in the female we call the round ligament where it goes into the labia, but we call this the ligamentum teres, and we use the Latin term, I don't know, maybe to differentiate, but it means round, which is a different structure. So that's the ligamentum teres, and that is what is going to be the umbilical vein traveling to the liver. The next fetal structure is the bypass between the liver and the inferior vena cava. And that is known as the ductus venosus. Again, it's no longer functional after the baby is born. And you can see it here connecting to the inferior vena cava. So that's the collapsed ductus venosus going into the inferior vena cava from the liver and is known as the ligamentum venosum. Foraminal valley, you already know, in the fetus is the foraminal valley. And in the adult, fossa ovalis. And then here is the remnant of the ductus arteriosus. This band of connective tissue between the left pulmonary artery and the aorta. In the fetus, ductus arteriosus. And now ligamentum arteriosum. Actually have 20 minutes to spare. The morning people had 10. Well, they had 15. So on Thursday, our schedule will be lab first, like we did today. All right, with time to study the veins. Hopefully you have time with open lab on Wednesday to study as well. And then lecture is going to be cardiac output, which we didn't cover earlier, bringing that together with blood pressure. So we're going to but we're going to go over how the heart regulates heart rate, which we've already talked about, how the SA node is regulated by norepinephrine and acetylcholine, how the heart regulates cardiac output, the effect of ions, the role of peripheral resistance, so blood pressure regulation. With that, since we're doing the lab, just a second, VP, since we're doing the lab at the beginning, we're going to be pressed for time to do the blood pressure lab. So I'm going to have to take a look at that. The PhysioX is on blood pressure is the extra credit one that's available. So I need to take a look about the actual blood pressure lab and see what we're going to do with that, because I don't want to push it. I want to give you enough time to study the veins on Thursday. Friday, we were supposed to start a new unit, which would not be on Tuesday's test, on the blood cells. I am not going to do that, and we will spend Friday in the other room doing review, nailing down some questions. Pardon?
No case study?
No, we'll have case studies Thursday as well.
Oh.
But on Friday, instead of talking about blood cells, which will be on the test anyway, I'll go back and